A warm welcome to our viewers here in Nigeria and around the world. We're glad you could join us. I'm Akaite Afia. South Africa's Health Minister, Dr. Zweli Mkhize, has appealed for calm as the country not only grapples with a new wave of high COVID-19 infections, but also a new variant of the virus, the same recorded in the United Kingdom. The minister, who briefed the nation along with scientists at the weekend, said the evidence collated strongly suggested that the current second wave being experienced in the country was being driven by the variant cited as the 501.V2. Dr. Mkhize said, however, that for now, the country's case management plans remain the same until scientists advise otherwise, and people must continue to adhere to health safety regulations.
Case management is guided by clinical manifestations of the pandemic, and this approach has still been effective irrespective of the reports of the mutation that has been identified. In other words, the same treatment that we have been using before, we're going to continue to use now. There's been no evidence to suggest that there is a need to change any of the clinical treatment. And if there would be such a situation, we'll talk about it and then we'll deal with it at that point. But right now, we will continue to treat in the way that we have been treating before. Even the fact that there's been a variant should not make us feel that there's any change. But we have also directed that our Ministerial Advisory Committee, which is the clinician subcommittee, should go into this matter. And then whenever there's going to be a need for changing the clinical treatment and patient management protocols, then they would actually report that and give us advisory when they deem it necessary. So we're watching that space. Right now, there's no need to change. There's no need to panic to think that there's some new treatment that we're going to need, or at this point to ask the question as to whether any of the treatment that has been used, is it going to be effective or not? At the moment, it has been effective even before we knew that there was a variant. So we want to keep that as a matter of reassurance to the public.
The European Union's medicine regulator has recommended the Pfizer-BioNTech coronavirus vaccine for use in the bloc's 27 states. The European Medicines Agency, or the EMA, authorized the drug for the EU's 446 million inhabitants after it went into circulation in the UK and in the United States. It is expected that the European Commission will formally approve the jab later on Monday. Distribution could begin in some EU states as early as Sunday. More than 311,000 lives have been lost to the pandemic across the bloc, and fears of a new surge in cases among people gathering for the Christmas and New Year's holidays have prompted partial lockdowns in countries like Germany and the Netherlands. Well, it started with countries within Europe, but now countries around the world are shutting flights and travel from the UK over a new strain of the coronavirus. Scientists around the world are still studying this variant of the disease, and we'll talk a bit more about this later. But imagine the chaos that it has caused as passengers struggle to leave the UK to beat deadlines given by home countries. France, Germany, Italy, the Netherlands, Austria, and even Israel and Canada are some of the countries that have so far shut travel ties, following Prime Minister Boris Johnson's warning that this variant is highly infectious and poses danger to the UK.
More countries have stepped up restrictions on travel to and from the UK after it reported a more infectious coronavirus variant. Russia, India, Hong Kong, Canada, Switzerland and Germany are among the latest to suspend UK flights after Prime Minister Boris Johnson warned that a highly infectious new strain of the virus was a danger to the country. France has shut its borders to arrivals of people and trucks from the United Kingdom, closing off one of the most important trade arteries with mainland Europe, leaving queues of lorries on motorways near major ports in Britain.
A problematic mutation of the virus, with a much more aggressive form, justified the exceptional measures in the UK and accelerated restrictions following these announcements. Several European countries decided to interrupt flights and connections with our British friends. We held an exceptional Defence Council yesterday, and we made decisions leading to the ban of all forms of transport from the UK for 48 hours.
Queues of travellers were seen rushing to beat the border closures in airports around Europe. But to the relief of many, Spain remains one of the few countries still open to UK flights.
We were apprehensive before the flight because we didn't know whether it was going to get cancelled or not.
I was concerned because I wasn't sure if I'd be able to go back home. I was going to be stuck here by myself. That's what my concern was. But I'm happy that I'm able to go back home.
European Union member states are meeting in Brussels to discuss a coordinated response on travel bans for Britain. The new variant is said to be up to 70% more transmissible, but there is no evidence that it is more deadly. It was first detected in September. In November, it made up around a quarter of cases in London. This reached nearly 2/3 of cases in mid-December.
The VOA's Henry Ridgewell joins us now. Henry, thanks for joining us on the program.
Good to be with you again.
So, Henry, talk to us about some more about this new variant of the COVID-19 disease, and how different is it from what we're already used to?
As your reporter said there, this new variant, the mutation, was first detected in September around southern Britain and started off at a very low level, but it has increased in number significantly in those 3 months. So it now makes up somewhere around 60 or 70% of all the new infections happening in London at the moment. Government scientists say that it appears that it is at least 50% more transmissible than the original version of the virus, but they don't believe yet that it causes any greater illness than the original variant, or that it might prove more resilient to the vaccines that have recently been approved here in Britain and other countries, but that remains to be seen for sure. Another worrying sign from government scientists here in Britain today was that they said this is likely to become the dominant global strain of the coronavirus going forward, simply because it is far more infectious than the old version. They say that over any given period of time, it seems to be infecting more and more people. So that now in southern Britain is the epicenter of this outbreak. You've already talked about the outbreak in South Africa of another variant of the coronavirus, and we've seen this sharp action that many countries around the world are taking to try to limit the spread of the virus to other parts of the world. But scientists say, given that this has been in existence for several months now, and given that travel has been open from Britain to other countries around the world, it's very likely that it is established in other countries. It has already been detected in some other countries like the Netherlands and other places in Europe. So it remains highly likely that other outbreaks will occur.
And Henry, how is the British government reacting to countries around the world shutting their flights to the UK? Are flights going out of the UK also being restricted?
They are. There is significant travel disruption at airports, with flights going from Britain to other countries being you mentioned. Now, over 40 countries have blocked all travel from Britain as they assess the dangers of this new variant of the virus. The British government, it seems, was taken somewhat by surprise across the weekend. The dangers of the new variant were outlined by scientists last week, but it wasn't until Saturday that the British government announced to the British public that these new significant lockdown measures were going to come in place, that essentially most Christmas travel or mixing with family was banned for most families in the south of England. And that news obviously filtered out very quickly around the world, and governments took urgent action to blockade any travel to and from the United Kingdom. And so the fact that, the biggest problem for Britain at the moment is that the Dover-Calais ferry and rail routes are blocked going from Britain to the continent. That means there are huge tailbacks of 20 miles or more long along the motorways leading to Dover. So exports are affected out of Britain, but you also imagine many haulage firms, many truck firms don't want to send their drivers into Britain, knowing that they may not be able to get home, especially as it's Christmas time. And so imports into Britain are also being affected. So the British government is having to deal with multiple crises here. A health crisis, which is developing very quickly. Over 33,000 infections in the last 24 hours and hundreds of deaths recorded every day. Political problems over some disgruntled MPs about the lockdown, but also these travel problems now and potential shortages of food over the Christmas period. And put on top of that, it's just 10 days until the end of the Brexit transition period, when there was significant disruption predicted anyway, and we still don't have a trade deal with the European Union. And you can understand why some analysts say Britain is about to enter the perfect storm. We'll know more about the British government's response within the next hour. Prime Minister Boris Johnson is expected to give a press conference around 5 o'clock local time, and then he will chair a meeting of the emergency so-called Cobra Committee. As you've mentioned, European leaders are meeting to decide a coordinated response. We're not expecting any news on that coordinated response until tomorrow.
All right. Well, Henry, thank you so much for joining us and giving us more insight into the situation. Do stay safe out there.
Thanks very much. You too.
Thank you. In the meantime, South Korea's capital, Seoul, and surrounding areas have banned gatherings of more than 4 people through the Christmas and New Year's holiday. This comes after South Korea recorded its highest daily death toll from the coronavirus today. The governments of Seoul, Gyeonggi Province, and Incheon City have ordered unprecedented restrictions on gatherings to take effect from Wednesday, December 23rd to January 3rd. Meanwhile, the national government has resisted calls to impose a strict national lockdown. Combined, the 2 cities and the province account for about half of South Korea's 51 million residents. The ban will apply to all indoor and outdoor functions, excluding funerals and weddings. Meanwhile, the Australian Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, says the growing Sydney coronavirus cluster was incredibly frustrating and disappointing for people across the country. New South Wales says 15 people had tested positive for COVID-19 in the past 24 hours, down from the 36 infections detected just a day earlier and bringing the total cases in the Northern Beaches outbreak to 83. It confirmed it had detected cases of the fast-spreading new coronavirus strain that has forced Britain to reverse plans to ease curbs over Christmas.
He is not done with us yet, that's very clear, and nor should we be surprised. The events of the past few days, I have no doubt, are incredibly frustrating and disappointing for people all around the country who had plans in place to get together and moving between states. The restrictions in Sydney of only 10 people in a home, all very sensible, but I understand that it will be disappointing and frustrating because of the disruptions that have taken place. Well, on the first point, I'm like any other Australian. Of course we wanted everything to be open by Christmas, but the virus has had a different idea about that. And that's just a practical reality. I should say, though, in 7 states and territories, we certainly will be having Christmas in this country like few countries in the world are. And so, every Christmas is a time to be thankful. And while there are frustrations and disappointments and disruptions this Christmas, I think here in Australia we have a lot to be thankful for and a lot to be grateful for. And those people who we are able to join with are the most important things we should be grateful for.
Still ahead on The World Today. Most people would say they need a superhero to save them from the coronavirus. One man thinks that superhero is not Superman, but Batman. Stay with us. Thanks for staying with us. Israel has begun administering vaccines against COVID-19 to the elderly and those in high-risk groups. The country started vaccinating its medical staff on Sunday, December 20th, and the wider adult population is scheduled to get their shots in early 2021. With a population of 9 million, Israel has logged 373,368 coronavirus cases and 3,074 deaths. It has imposed 2 national lockdowns and is mulling new curbs on high contagion areas.
So it feels less than a flu shot. I'm used to doing this with my insulin. Thank God I feel amazing. This is a day we waited for. Life was very hard the past 10 months. I thank God for sending the doctors to really get this vaccine going in record time.
I feel wonderful. I didn't feel a thing, and I'm very excited that now I'm on the way to being totally vaccinated, which will allow me to travel and to increase my social interactions and to contribute to the society, that being part of the solution to this issue, that we will be able to get back to our normal lives.
We started yesterday to vaccinate our citizens. We already did yesterday 600, and for today they are scheduled about another 600 or 700. Already, up to now, everything is fine. No side effects, nothing else.
Well, let's move away from the coronavirus now. In Britain, 2 men were found guilty today of the manslaughter of 39 men, women, and children from Vietnam after their bodies were found in the back of a refrigerated truck near London last year. The deaths shocked Britain and Vietnam and shone a spotlight on the illicit global trade that sends the poor of Asia, Africa, and the Middle East on perilous journeys to the West. 24-year-old Iman Harrison, a lorry driver from Northern Ireland, was found guilty of 39 counts of manslaughter and 1 count of conspiracy to assist unlawful immigration. 43-year-old Georgie Nika from Essex in southeast England was found guilty of the same charges. 2 others had already pleaded guilty to being involved in the deaths. Most of those who died, aged between 44 and 15, were from G and Ha Tinh provinces in north-central Vietnam, where poor job prospects, environmental disasters, and the promise of financial reward abroad fuel immigration. Meanwhile, in Germany, a court has sentenced a man to life in prison for killing 2 people in a shooting attack near a synagogue in eastern Germany on the Jewish holy day Yom Kippur last year. The Naumburg Higher Regional Court found the man, referred to by authorities only as Stefan B., guilty of murder, attempted murder, and incitement, according to a court spokesman. Stephen B., who live-streamed the shooting in the city of Halle on the internet, had confessed to the crime and to a far-right anti-Semitic motivation. Prosecutors said he aimed to kill as many as possible of the more than 50 worshippers inside the synagogue. Only his poor aim and the unreliability of his homemade firearms spared 9 other people from injury during his half-hour rampage, according to the intended victims. The British government has ruled out extending the deadline for reaching a post-Brexit trade deal into 2021, amid deadlock in talks and a growing COVID crisis. SNP leader Nicola Sturgeon and London Mayor Sadiq Khan want the UK to follow EU trading rules beyond the 31st of December to allow more time for an agreement. But Downing Street says it would explore all routes to a deal before then, despite being on short time. UK-EU talks continue with 10 days left to reach and ratify any agreement. The UK has kept following EU regulations since it left the bloc on the 31st of January, but it will exit its internal market and customs union when this transition period finishes at the end of the year. Without a trade deal, both sides could place import taxes on each other's goods, potentially affecting prices. As Brexit talks continue, France wants to continue sticking to its red lines, such as the right to fish in British waters. This was made known by French government spokesman Gabriel Attal. Talks on reaching a deal on future relations have been largely hamstrung over two issues: the EU's fishing rights in British waters and creating a so-called level playing field, ensuring fair competition rules for businesses on both sides. Well, to outer space now. Today is a special day, as in a celestial phenomenon not seen in 397 years. The largest planets in our solar system, Jupiter and Saturn, from the perspective of observers on Earth, will appear to be closely aligned, so much so that they will almost seem to be one single star in the sky. Every few years, from the perspective of Earthlings, the two planets seem to pass each other in the same general area of the sky, and that is known as a conjunction. According to NASA, when the two planets align on this date, however, they will seem to be much closer, a great conjunction, with only 6 arc minutes of sky separating them. This once-in-a-lifetime event has become popularly known as the Christmas star because it is happening during the holiday season. It is believed the 3 kings who are recorded in the New Testament as traveling to pay homage to the infant Jesus, guided by the legendary Star of Bethlehem, may have witnessed the same phenomenon in the year 7 AD. And finally on the program, a fan of fictional comic book superheroes says the year 2020 needs Batman and not Santa Claus to save it from the coronavirus pandemic and spread cheer this holiday season. The Egyptian enthusiast drives his Batmobile around his Cairo neighborhood, handing out face masks to residents this Christmas season.
28-year-old Bassem Rauf usually drives around his Cairo neighborhood in his custom-designed Batmobile, waving to passers-by and taking pictures with fellow fans. But this Christmas, with the coronavirus pandemic limiting traditional celebrations, Rauf has been handing out face masks to residents he finds along his usual route.
This year, we do not need Santa Claus. We need a legend, a character known around the world as a hero. We need this character in the streets to spread awareness. Gift giving this year should be masks and other materials with the aim of raising awareness.
In countries around the world, a spike of cases during the second wave has shut down the usual shops and holiday markets and forced millions to stay at home instead.
It's such a wonderful idea, especially since cases in Egypt are beginning to rise, and it's important for everyone in Egypt to start wearing masks and taking precaution.
Like many superfans around the world, Rauf had always dreamt of having his own Batmobile to drive around town, and says he often stops to allow others to take pictures of him and his customized vehicle.
Batman is a character who many around the world grew up knowing it as a good guy who fights evil. Both old and young people like him. I too love Batman and always had a dream growing up that I find a car similar to Batman's car. This was a dream of mine ever since I was young.
Egypt has so far recorded over 124,000 cases since the start of the pandemic, with more than 7,000 deaths.
Well, I don't remember Batman having a mustache, but that is a pretty sweet Batmobile. That is all we have for today on The World Today. Thank you so much for staying with us. I'm Akaite Afia. Have a great evening and stay safe.